Good morning, Committee of License and Inspections, and good morning, Philadelphia. I want to thank you all for joining us here today and all those who also joined us here today in every level of support. So I understand that state law currently requires that the following announcements be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, the Inquirer, and the Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings, and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I note that the hour has come. Mr. Brazel is our clerk. Would you please read the roll and take attendance? Members that are in the attendance, would you please indicate that you are present when your name is called? Also, please say a few brief words when responding that your image will be displayed on the screen as you speak. Mr. Brazel.
Councilmember Alan Dom.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and colleagues present.
Councilmember Mark Squilla.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and colleagues present.
Councilmember Kenyatta Johnson.
Present. Good morning, everyone.
Councilmember David O.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, colleagues. I am present.
Good morning.
Councilmember Curtis Jones Jr.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, colleagues, and viewing public.
And Councilmember Catherine Gilmore Richardson. It's back to you, Chairman.
And my name is Bobby Heenan, the chair of L&I, and I am present. And I want to thank all the members for being here in attendance this morning. Thank you. A quorum of this committee is present, and this hearing is now called to order. This is the public hearing of the Committee on License and Inspections regarding bill numbers 210117, 210205, 210388, 210389, and 210481. Mr. Brazel, would you please read the titles of the bills?
Bill number 210117, amending Chapter 9, 3700 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Bouncers by revising definitions of covered establishments and personnel under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 210205, amending Chapter 9 of Subcode PM, the Philadelphia Property Maintenance Code, of Title 4 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Additional Special Requirements to establish a program in which the city may perform certain urgent repairs and bill the property owner under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 210388, amending Chapter 9 1000 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Trades to modify licensing and conduct requirements applicable to contractors, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 210389, amending Title 4 of the Philadelphia Code entitled the Philadelphia Building Construction and Occupancy Code, and Title 9 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Regulations of Businesses, Trades, and Professions, to revise provisions relating to excavation work and work impacting historic structures, create an excavation contractor license, and institute additional safeguards for property adjoining certain construction activities, all under certain terms and conditions. And Bill number 210481, amending Chapter 9 600 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Services and Other Businesses to modify the requirements to operate a self-service laundry, all under certain terms and conditions.
Thank you. Before we begin hearing testimony from the witnesses we have for today, everyone who has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this is a public hearing and it is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By consenting to be in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to being recognized, members for questions or comments they have for witnesses, I will note that for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purpose. Before we call our witness and offering testimony on bill number 210117, would any of my colleagues like to make any comments or opening remarks regarding this ordinance? Mr. Purcell, do we have anybody to testify on 210117?
Mary Hortzman.
Welcome, Mary. Please state your name for the record, and you may begin with your testimony. And thank you.
Good morning, Councilmember Keenan and other members of the Committee of License and Inspections. My name is Mary Horseman, Senior Policy Director of the Managing Director's Office. I'm here to testify in support of Bill number 210117, which clarifies the definition of bouncer and the place where they are required. Joining me today is Sarah Damo of License and Inspections. The Philadelphia Code prohibits covered establishments from employing individuals as bouncers unless that individual has completed a third-party training approved by the city within 45 days of the date of hire. Upon successful completion of the course, the bouncer receives certification from the training facility, which serves as a permanent registration. The bouncer then must file a copy of the certification with the city and retain a copy of the certification provided to employers as proof of completing the required training. These rules are intended to reduce the number of incidents of bodily harm to customers by overzealous or aggressive bouncers. This bill redefines a bouncer as any person who regularly performs duties related to security or maintains order and safety in a covered establishment, including but not limited to validating proper age of identification for entry. Covered establishments include nightclubs, discotheques, cabarets, taverns and bars, restaurants, private clubs, banquet halls, similar places of assembly without primarily fixed seating. The proposed amendment limits the number of restaurants which would need to comply to one to 130 or more seats. The MDO administers the city's bouncer certification program, including certifying bouncer training programs and maintaining a list of certified bouncers and bouncer training programs on the city's website. The administration supports Bill number 210117 as it is supposed to be amended and believes that the main requirement of the bill, professional trainer for training for bouncers, will make residents and visitors safer as they enjoy the many establishments the city has to offer. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Mary, thank you for your testimony. I think the intent of this bill really closes a few loopholes, but it also prepares for reopening and addresses some of the issues that we've discovered during the pandemic with illegal operations, speakeasies, and other establishments, occupy a building, have big parties, put everybody in danger, doesn't adhere to the proper training and the policies that we, as council and former administration, has sought within the community's best public health and safety interests. So I thank you for that. Chair recognizes Councilmember O.
Thank you very much. I'm having internet issues, so if I freeze out, let me know. I just have a question about the certification process. What are the standards for the certifiers?
So a bouncer training program has to put together a 16-hour curriculum that has to include information on the role of bouncer, the power and obligations and limitations under the law of what their role can be, access control and emergency egress, alcohol management, first aid, crowd control, age certification, and de-escalation and conflict resolution, among a couple of other items. So we can send you some more details about what goes into certifying a training as appropriate for this, for bouncer preparation.
Yeah, would you please? That would be great. Thank you very much.
Happy to do that.
And Ms. Schwartzman, for the record, can you let the committee and viewing public know how long the bouncer training and requirements have been around? They were put in place. I know Councilman Greenlee worked hard for many years, trying to establish this criteria. in something, that was, in some issues, all right, around the city that was sort of like growing and escalating. So this was an attempt to try to educate, train, and de-escalate, in places where large gatherings and alcohol in large quantities will be being served, legally, of course.
Right. Yeah. So this was established in 2011.
All right. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, council member. And we'll make sure that you get all the criteria for the proper training. Does anyone else on the committee have any questions pertaining to bill number 210117? I do not see any. Ms. Horstman, thank you for your testimony. Is there any? I apologize. Is there anyone else here that joined us from the public that wish to testify or have any comments or concerns with bill number 210117? That being done, thank you so much for your testimony. Mr. Prezell, would you please have our next person to testify witness for bill number 210205?
Sarah Adamo.
Good morning, Sarah. Please state your name for the record, and you may proceed with your testimony. Before I do, I apologize. I would like to ask the sponsor of this bill if he wishes to make any comments to open, or would you prefer to reserve after Sarah's testimony?
Chairman, you're talking to me?
Yes, sir.
I think I should go first based on the fact that I've read her testimony. Let me first apologize about my voice, Mr. Chairman, members, but blame it on the 76ers basketball team. All right? In the 4th District, no, before I do that, I want to apologize to Member Johnson, to Member Goodyear, and to Member President Clark. Why, you may ask, is because I believed the gentrification problem in Philadelphia was primarily their problem, and one that I support their efforts to deal with, but I really didn't think early on it was going to hit the 4th Councilmanic District, my district, the way it has, Mr. Chairman. So I want to, on the record, apologize to them. In my district, there are 2 types of housing. There's new construction, which we don't get as much of as in the 5th and in the 2nd and in the 3rd. But the major way housing is dealt with in my district is through preservation. So PHDC and remediation, L&I are critical players to keep residents in their homes. If you remember yesterday and heard the testimony in reference to evictions and credit, there was a young lady that talked about Penn Win and talked about the fact that there were 200 units in the Penn Win building where maintenance was deferred. No heat in the winter, no air conditioning in the summer, and all kinds of violations in between. Eventually, they were asked to leave based on the math of it is better to sell than to repair. Many of those constituents of mine no longer live in my district. It was one of the hardest things I ever had to deal with. On other occasions in Griff Shalom and Penn and the Pavilion, also in my district, one of those buildings is up for sheriff's sale, has had violations of life-protecting sprinkler systems not to mention raccoons and possums that live in the building, many of whom are senior citizens. Many of them are veterans. Many of them have mobility issues. And when the lights went out, had to go down the service stairs using the lights from their cell phones. On individual blocks, onesies, twosies, many district council people have to deal with weed trees that grow from one property into other properties right through the walls and right through the ceiling, damaging the property, causing abandonment, and creating opportunities for gentrification. In my district now, Member Johnson, there are vans full of people that go on safari looking for properties that they can buy because they've been abandoned. In my district and around the city, when a lateral breaks and they're not insured by an insurance company, that leak causes damage downstream to other properties. And the city of Philadelphia, if you do not fix them, after 15 days, will shut off your water. And nothing will make you homeless quicker than no access to water. I say these things to say that this legislation will allow teams working with L&I, working with PHDC, to remediate those kinds of conditions in properties where absentee landlords or people who just can't afford to make repairs can do so. This is not an infinite, finite pool of money, but a establishing pool where liens can be put on properties so that when they're sold, that the city recoups its investment. You're going to hear that this is going to cause all kinds of risks. True. But we can do this through risk management, through insurance policies, that we then also put the cost of those policies on the homes that we repair. They're going to say, we don't have enough money to establish a pool. Well, it's cheaper to keep them in their homes, because if you wind up in a shelter, it can cost tens of thousands of dollars more than the repairs. So we are being often penny wise and pound foolish. I say that because often, and I've been an administrator, as long as it doesn't come out of my budget, I'm not going to go into the next silo to figure out how it can be done. Our job as legislators is to be solutionary. And I believe that if we work together to create regulations that address these problems, your districts, your constituents will be better off for it. We have done this in the past, where we came in, made repairs to party walls, made repairs to leaky roofs that impacted neighbors' buildings before. So I don't want you to think we're recreating the wheel. Finally, I want to say, Mr. Chairman, New York City does this. Washington, D.C. does this. Los Angeles does this, because they understand with a homeless problem that we all face, it is better ultimately to let people live in their homes than to provide temporary and alternative housing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your opening statements prior to the testimony, and I certainly understand the intent and spirit of your legislation that we're being heard today. Chair now recognizes Sarah Damo. Again, please state your name for the record, and you may proceed with your testimony.
Good morning, Chairperson Heenan and members of the Licenses and Inspections Committee. My name is Sarah Damo, and I'm the Legislative Affairs Manager for the Department of Licenses and Inspections, or L&I. I am here to provide testimony on Bill number 210205, which, if enacted, will amend Chapter 9 of Subcode PM, the Philadelphia Property Maintenance Code, of Title 4 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Additional Special Requirements, to establish a program in which the city may perform certain urgent repairs and bill the property owner, all under certain terms and conditions. I am joined today by Barry Scott, the city's risk manager. This ordinance seeks to define certain code violations as public nuisances and provides a means for the department, or L&I, to remediate and repair the nuisance in a timely manner in an effort to minimize the negative impacts on the residents and near neighbors, including displacement. The ordinance provides a 1-month window where the owner of the property could make a repair or show a good faith effort of beginning the repair process. If, after that point, no steps have been taken towards repairing the condition, the department shall remediate and repair the nuisance, and the owner shall be billed for the expenses incurred. After a period of non-payment of 30 days, a lien shall be placed against the property. The administration supports the intent of this bill and understands that the violations targeted in this legislation, which are a lack of heating and damaged plumbing, can be detrimental to the residents and near neighbors. It is important to help encourage property owners to maintain their properties in a manner that prevents displacement of residents whenever possible. That being said, the administration does have concerns about our capacity to effectively implement the program. First, the department has concerns that in many cases, we will not be successful in gaining access to the property in order to make the necessary inspection and/or repairs. Typically, L&I would need the permission of the property owner or landlord to gain access to the property. A tenant could potentially gain access to the building. A tenant could potentially grant access to the building, but they would not be able to give access to areas of the building that are not shared, which means in a lot of cases, the area where utilities are located would be off limits. Without permission to gain access to the building, L&I would need to obtain a court order to enter the structure and make the repairs. Outside of voluntary access or a court order, L&I would simply not be able to enter the property and the repairs could not be made. Next, there are concerns regarding the liability that the city would be subject to if we were to perform the repairs. The bill would require the city to enter a property that we don't own to effect repairs. We are not familiar with the design, maintenance, or operation of the relevant systems and any reason why the systems are not functioning. The systems could require parts that are no longer available, replacement of significant pieces of building systems, and/or the complete replacement of the entire system. This would include costs for diagnosis of the problem and repair and replacement of building finishes, which may need to be damaged to gain access for the repair or replacement. Construction operations also contain risk of injury to workers and the public. The city could potentially be liable for bodily harm and/or property damage associated with any system repair that we are trying to effectuate. In addition, anyone performing the work would need to be responsible for the quality and effectiveness of the work immediately and for some period of time after the repair is completed. Additionally, any other building problems which occur after the city entered the building could be blamed on the city, and we would need to defend against any such allegations. Lastly, we have concerns about the capacity of the department to manage the program and the cost of the repairs that would be incurred by the city. A program would need to be developed to prioritize properties with open violations, select licensed contractors, and ensure that the work is completed in a timely code-compliant manner. The department is not able to take on the administrative responsibilities of managing this program. The proper management of the program would be essential to ensuring its success. Additionally, the cost of these repairs, especially on larger structures, are significant. The administration is apprehensive about our ability to recover funds from the property owner after the repairs have been completed. Without adequate funding, the desired goal of this legislation would not be achieved. While the administration is supportive of the intent, we cannot currently support this bill given the concerns that I have explained. The administration is open to working with council to address the issues this bill aims to address. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on behalf of the administration. We are happy to answer questions at this time.
Thank you for your testimony. Before I open up to the committee, I do have a few questions myself. Property maintenance is not a sexy topic. It doesn't hit the papers, all right, but it directly impacts the quality of life, the health, and the safety of every resident in the city of Philadelphia. And you know, a few questions that I have regarding Councilmember Jones's issues and concerns, and you know, the direction that he's heading here is because I think he's frustrated, right? I think the residents of the city of Philadelphia are frustrated. To me, it seems like we have, and Sarah, this isn't directed at you, but it more of the department. Seems like there's lack of enforcement, right, or selective enforcement from the Department of L&I on these issues. Some of the concerns that, and only the council member Jones can answer is, was L&I ever on site at any of these properties? Was there an imminent dangerous situation, on the property itself? Was the health department notified, that there was health concerns? It could have been, in these older homes, especially, in Councilmember Jones's aging properties, you have historic properties, so you could have had lead paint, you could have had mold, you could have had asbestos. So there's a lot of concerns that trouble me with not having enough resources, meaning enforcement on the street, visiting these constituent and offices' complaints. I mean, I just think it persists. And we're talking about not having enough resources. Well, we don't even get to the places. We just hear concerns over and over and over again. And I know Councilmember Damo, has talked about it recently in other topics, the definition of insanity, but we keep doing the same thing. And then we just keep on adding, more policies and, cost more, when the fact is, it can be in preventative measures. It can be making sure that we invest in staff and people, all right, so the public is out of harm. So I guess I just wanted to make that statement. I have a lot of concerns with the department, especially collaborating with, PHDC or risk management and the health department. So I want to, divert a question over to Councilmember Jones. Councilmember Jones, in some of the situations that you cite, was the department called? Anybody respond? And was the proper enforcement and was there proper enforcement? And was any of those properties in eminently dangerous situations?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that is a great question. And the one that comes to mind is there was a lady on Diamond Street in the 52nd Ward who called my office, who was a renter, who said, my property owner refuses to fix a soil pipe. And that soil pipe had caused leakage into the basement to the point where the waste was intolerable, and she called me for help. I called thinking I was government here to save you, L&I. And this is before your time, probably. So take a deep breath, it's okay. When they got there, they said, Councilman, you're absolutely right. These conditions are intolerable. We're going to condemn the property. The lady has to leave. Well, if I'd have known she was going to go from the frying pan into the fire, I might not have called them. Whereas going there, the preferred option would have been, yes, this is a problem. Can you vacate for a day or two? We're going to fix that soil pipe. We're going to bill that negligent owner, and you can come back in to your home. Penny wise, pound foolish, in my opinion. There are situations where neighbors in my district have had and called L&I about a plumbing problem in the house next door where sewage, because of gravity, was coming around into their property. The owner refused or could not, I don't know which one it was, fix it. Totally impeding upon their property and damaging a would have been man cave. Now, we as the city, in my opinion, should create that fund so that we can remediate. And the notion that we don't already do it, we do. When we go into a house with permission to do major systems repair, we deal with all of those insurance issues, all of those liabilities issues, all of those concerns about future damage if the bond is called upon, bond of insurance, that if the work was improperly done. So, Mr. Chairman, I think we can work out the details, but the idea and direction we need to go is clear. If we're going to save affordable housing in this town, this is a clear tool to do that. Instead of kicking maintenance down the road, waiting for buildings to be abandoned, and then have speculators come and turn my district into a rental community.
Thank you, Council Member. Chair recognizes Council Member John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Councilman Jones, for this bill. Thank you, Sarah, for your testimony. I have a few questions. I just want to make sure I understand. It sounds like this is a problem that's in between taking care of your home and demolishing your home. This is a step where it's kind of the middle, where something's not being done right by a neighbor, whether it's a landlord or an owner-occupant owner, and we're looking for the tool to fix the problem. Is that my understanding of basically what we're trying to do here?
Within limits. I don't think the intent of this bill is to be a cure-all for all problems. But if there's a weed tree growing into your roof, that can be resolved relatively easily by L&I. And so I would be willing to work with L&I to define what types of repairs need that we feel comfortable in making. If it's a party wall crumbling, then member Dom is correct. Maybe that's a demolition issue, and it crosses a threshold that we are not comfortable in assuming repair responsibilities. But there are a lot of issues way before demolition that we can address.
I was actually thinking, though, that along the lines you're thinking, if we could, this is kind of like preventive maintenance to a degree, okay? And we have the oldest housing stock, I think, in the country, so this problem is only going to get worse as time goes on. And I guess I don't think I'm not against the idea at all. I think it's a good idea. I just want to make sure we can cover the liabilities that Sarah's talking about and make sure we have that covered. I think that's the big issue for me. I'd love for us to maintain these things and fix it and set up a fund, and we can bill back the owners or put a lien on their property. I just don't want us to get sued by the individuals on this situation.
Agreed.
So I guess my other question is, if there was, Councilmember Jones, a tree growing in an adjacent lot that didn't have a property, and that tree's roots, this has happened, starts to affect the foundation of the adjacent property, how's that currently handled?
I think the onus is on, this is Councilman Heenan, I think the onus is on the property owner, not the adjacent property. So if somebody refuses to cut a tree, take care of things that are growing onto someone else's property, it's their responsibility. But it's their responsibility. So it would have to be their insurance and or at their cost. There's nothing right now to Councilmember Jones's point. There's nothing now to cover, right, that adjacent property owner for someone else's responsibility.
So it's like a civil matter between the two property owners, basically.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that response. Thank you very much.
Sarah, I have another question because there's a lot that rise here with this conversation. Councilmember Jones is talking about 30 days. What are the service agreement timelines for L&I?
The way that the bill outlines our responses to these violations, it would be that we would pay our first visit to the property, issue a violation. They have, I believe it says 1 month to repair. If they haven't made the repair or made good faith effort towards working towards that repair at that point, then we could potentially remediate the problem for them. After that point, they're billed and they have 30 days to pay for the repair until the lien is placed on their property.
And what are the service agreements for L&I currently for an issue? So, Councilmember Jones is he points out a sewer issue, right? And that is a very serious health hazard and requires immediate attention. So what is the service agreement on that? How is that handled? And what are other roofs, sidewalk or roofs, steps? What are their service agreements?
Okay, so I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question. So you're asking, once we get the complaint, how long does it take for us to
Correct.
Get out to the property? Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So all of our service level agreements are based on the severity of the complaint. I believe the longest that we have is 20 days, but there are some that we respond to within a day or two. So it depends on what the severity is. And underpinning is the best example. If you call 311 and you say the property next to me is illegally digging out their basement, I'm scared that the building's going to collapse, we will be out there, as soon as possible, immediately. That's a very quick turnaround time. If you call and say my neighbor has weeds in their front yard, that's going to be a longer turnaround time. But everything is within 20 days, and we do prioritize the more severe complaints.
Okay. Councilmember Jones, you still have your hand up. Is that, you want to take that down? Are you good?
I'm good, Mr. Chair.
All right. So, Councilmember Jones, it seems like there's a lot to discuss and still work at, and you've done incredible work, showing best practices and, pointing out different cities, right, that have programs to address some of these issues and or services that address these, kind of threatening, health and safety issues. Would you be willing to put together a working group with some other members of council and in different departments with the city? One obviously being L&I, PHC, CD, and try to figure out how we can actually enforce and address the issues that are being raised here today and that have, been an issue in your district and mine, quite frankly, for many years.
Mr. Chairman, I think if we could pass this out of committee, I think we could hold it over the summer, do a work group that looks at practical implementation issues, which I do respect. L&I's job is to safeguard the city's interests, but our job is also to safeguard the city residents' interests. And so let's work it out.
Great. Well, listen, I respect you and, appreciate what you do for your district and your professional courtesy here today. So I think that's a great suggestion. We'll, for members of the committee and Sarah with the department, after the budget season, maybe we can, form a working group, council member, and we can figure out who needs to be a part of that in department wise, and any members of this committee, with the permission of the sponsor, welcome to have any kind of input and join in on this, a working group as we move forward. So the intent here today will be to vote it out. Councilmember Jones is going to hold it, and we will Councilmember Jones will form a working group committee to try to address, all right, and find a solution that makes sense and that will be enforceable and that we're able to execute, properly and responsibly. So, Councilmember Jones, I thank you for that, and members of the committee, I thank you for that. Is there anyone else here who wishes to testify on Bill number 210205? Is there any other members of council have any further questions or comments? I see in the chat that Councilmember Damo is willing to work with Councilmember Jones on the working group committee. Thank you, Councilmember, for your volunteering to address these issues. All right, that being done, Sarah, thank you for your testimony. We will now move on to our next bill that is here before us, and let me see here. Sarah, you have testimony for bill number 210389. And if you do, please start by stating your name, and you may proceed with your testimony.
Okay, you want 389 next or 388? I just want to double check. You're on mute.
We will move on to 210388. Was my error.
Okay, just wanted to check.
You are correct.
Okay. Good morning, Chairperson Heenan and members of the Licenses and Inspections Committee. My name is Sarah Damo, and I'm the Legislative Affairs Manager of the Department of Licenses and Inspections. I am here to provide testimony on Bill number 210388, which, if enacted, will amend Chapter 9-1000 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Trades to modify licensing and conduct requirements applicable to contractors, all under certain terms and conditions. If enacted, the ordinance will make a number of changes to the trade license requirement that all licensed contractors are subject to. First, contractors will not be permitted to employ an individual that is subject to an active suspension or revocation of a trade license. Additionally, on an initial application and renewal application, an applicant will be asked to affirm that no individual subject to an active trade license or suspension or revocation hold an ownership interest in or is knowingly employed by the applicant. Second, all contractors shall be required to cooperate in any audit and investigation conducted by L&I or any other city or law enforcement agency. They are also required to provide prompt, accurate, and complete responses to inquiries by the department and other appropriate agencies. Lastly, several additional conditions have been added to the code as potential reasons for license suspension or revocation. These reasons include willful violation of a stop work order, fraud or deceit in responding to a department audit or investigation, and creation of a dangerous condition or risk to public safety. The code changes proposed in this ordinance will provide additional tools to the department's Audits and Investigations Unit, or AIU. AIU is responsible for enforcing contractor compliance with various legally mandated business practices. Its inspection staff's duties include performing unannounced job site inspections to verify that an OSHA 30 site safety manager is present. Every worker on site has an OSHA 10 card. Every worker on site is either employed by the named contractor or is a licensed subcontractor. That all required insurance is still current, and employees requiring specialty trade licenses have the requisite license and certifications. When unlicensed contractors are discovered, along with initiating L&I sanctions and fines, AIU makes referrals to the Revenue Department to investigate companies for tax compliance. This bill will strengthen AIU's ability to enforce licensing requirements for contractors and trade licenses by requiring contractors and other trade licensees to cooperate with the department's investigations. This will put the department in a better position to issue violations and license sanctions against contractors who employ unlicensed subcontractors and otherwise engage in the underground economy, and ensure that the department can thoroughly investigate unsafe construction and issue the appropriate sanctions to the responsible parties. It authorizes AIU to suspend contractors who create dangerous conditions or risk to public safety, who knowingly violate stop work orders, or who attempt to conceal wrongdoing by deceit or fraud, deceiving or defrauding the department during an investigation. This bill would also strengthen the city's ability to enforce license suspensions or revocations by making it a code violation for a company licensed as a contractor to knowingly employ an individual that was subject to a license suspension. In other words, if a contractor has their company's license suspended, that contractor will no longer be able to set up a new company or get a new contractor's license or go work for another licensed contractor. The Department of Licenses and Inspections is supportive of this bill and is prepared to enforce its provisions should it become law. Thank you for the opportunity to provide the department's testimony. I am happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you for your testimony. I just have a few questions. So, So a lot of things, and look, I love this bill. I think this is great. You're talking, you're talking my language here. What is the genesis of this bill? Why are we doing this bill as opposed to enforcing the law that we have on the books and the laws and policies we do have on the books, which you cite, like OSHA 30, make it, named contractor on site, a licensed contractor on site, tax compliance, license certifications for specific crafts, dealing with somebody who is not licensed, who doesn't pay taxes, who doesn't pull permits, which we call the underground economy. Why this bill for audits and investigations as opposed to just enforcing the law as is?
So the law as is being enforced. I mean, that is, the work that AIU does every single day. This bill really serves to close loopholes that exist. So one of the examples is that a licensed contractor whose license has been revoked or suspended, right now there's nothing in the code that prevents them from starting a new company, getting a new license, and continuing to work in the city. That's a huge loophole. So this really serves to just give AIU more teeth and really serves to close the existing loopholes, to make their work, more efficient, and, the results of their work will be, will benefit from the results of their work even more so.
Great, and I wanted you to state to that, that point, because that is obviously for me my favorite part of this legislation, closing those loopholes and giving you legal standing. All right, when it comes to let's just say it's like investors playing a shell game and creating an LLC and creating different either partnerships or trying to mask themselves with their license because they were unscrupulous with their behavior and their business practices by really putting people in unsafe conditions and not adhering to the law. So I think that is that loophole language that we have here is extremely important. And, I appreciate you talking about that for the record. Is there anyone on the committee have any comments, questions, or concerns on bill number 210388? Well, thank you for your testimony. Before we move on, is there anyone else here who has joined us in this hearing wishes to speak on bill number 210388? That being none, we will now move on to bill number 210389. Mr. Damo, if you have testimony on bill number 210389, please state your name for the record and you may proceed with your testimony. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson Heenan and members of the Licenses and Inspections Committee. My name is Sarah Damo, and I'm the Legislative Affairs Manager of the Department of Licenses and Inspections. I am here to provide testimony on bill number 210389, which, if enacted, will amend Title IV of the Philadelphia Code, entitled the Philadelphia Building Construction and Occupancy Code, and Title IX of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Regulations of Businesses, Trades, and Professions, to revise provisions related to excavation work and work impacting historic structures, create an excavation contractor license, and institute additional safeguards for property adjoining certain construction activities, all under certain terms and conditions. The intention of this bill is to provide additional protections where excavation occurs adjacent to an existing structure or where construction or demolition occurs on or near a building on the Philadelphia Registry of Historic Structures. The following summarizes the proposed changes related to excavations. These changes apply to all excavations, not just those in close proximity to historic structures. First, a separate permit will be required for excavations more than 5 feet below grade and within 10 feet of an existing structure, excluding excavations for utilities and geotechnical exploration. Second, a separate trade license will be required to obtain an excavation permit. The permit application will require the identification of a site safety manager with OSHA 3015 certification or equivalent, a general liability insurance policy with a $2 million limit, and $100,000 license bond. Third, the excavation permit application will require the submission of pre-construction surveys and an excavation plan. Fourth, continuous special inspections by a licensed special inspector are required during excavation operations. Fifth, notification to adjacent property owners is required prior to excavation. The notification must include project details, protective measures, and contact information. Lastly, the project information sign must identify if excavation and/or underpinning is included in the scope of the approved permit. Excavation, especially when done near existing structures, can be dangerous, and if errors are made, the results can be catastrophic. The intention of this legislation is to ensure that when excavations are being performed, they are done in a safe, code-compliant manner, and that the work is done by a qualified contractor under the supervision of a licensed special inspector. Additionally, the department believes that requiring a separate permit will provide awareness to the public and near neighbors about the work being done in their neighborhoods. The other proposed changes by this bill are specific to construction work or demolitions performed on or near historic structures. The following summarizes those proposed changes. First, a permit holder will be required to submit pre-construction plans and/or a monitoring plan prepared by a licensed professional engineer if they meet the following conditions. The first condition is excavation, construction, or demolition will occur within 90 feet of a building or structure designated on the Philadelphia Registry of Historic Places and located on the same lot or abutting lot. The second condition is a building designated on the Philadelphia Registry of Historic Places is undergoing structural alteration or addition, except if that building is a single or two-family dwelling. The other part of the historic portion of this bill is that special inspections are required to be conducted by a licensed special inspector in accordance with the approved monitoring plan. The intention of these changes is to take proactive steps to protect historic structures when construction or demolition is taking place nearby. Since every scenario is unique, it's important that the necessary steps are taken prior to the start of work to ensure that all necessary precautions are in place and proper monitoring is established. These extra steps will help to ensure that the city's historic structures are preserved and maintained for years to come. The Department of Licenses and Inspections is supportive of this bill and is prepared to enforce its provisions should it become law. Thank you for the opportunity to provide the department's testimony. I am happy to answer questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Damo, for your testimony. Can you let the committee and the general public know how long the department has been looking into doing into this policy, because it's been an issue for years? I think I say that because I think this has been a work in progress for some time, which is great, and you're responding to a lot of the issues that we're experiencing in the neighborhoods, the collar neighborhoods of of Center City proper, which has been experiencing exponential amount of construction in both residential and in some of our historic sites or near our historic buildings.
So the question is how long we've been working on this legislation.
It's just a general question. Like you've been looking into this for some time, and then the pandemic hit last year, and
Sure.
things were put on hold. So this is an issue that just didn't arise. This has been an issue and a concern for the department and a lot of people in our neighborhoods for quite some time. So this has been a progress that has finally made it to the hearing here.
Sure. So I'm actually joined today by Elizabeth Baldwin. She might be able to provide some additional insight to the timeline of how we started working on this legislation.
Great.
Thank you.
Ms. Baldwin, welcome.
Thank you very much. So we've been actually dealing with this issue since I started with the department in 2006. Protection of adjacent structures for infill construction has been an ongoing issue for a very long time. So we've been really looking at the problem for the past 15 years, and it really became prevalent over the past 5 years, I would say. This particular solution we've been developing over the past 2 years.
Exactly my point, and thank you for that. And for the record, Ms. Baldwin is Elizabeth or Betsy. I'm not sure exactly what your official title is, but Betsy represents the city of Philadelphia at the state level for our review and advisory committee for uniform construction codes. So she is quite the expert when it comes to the many different codes that integrate into our Philadelphia code. So I want to thank you for your service for ensuring our safety in the city.
Thank you very much.
For some of the members' kind of background, Councilmember Dom has talked about underpinning in the past. So we have these neighborhoods, in the River Wards, and Councilman Johnson and now Councilman Jones have experienced a whole lot of construction, and a lot of times, some of these contractors are unscrupulous. They don't follow the rules. They don't report. There's no record, and when they dig, all right, it can be very, very dangerous when it comes to adjacent properties. And there was conversations similar to Councilmember Jones talking about, a fund or risk management or how do we protect the adjacent properties. But we are an aging city when it comes to properties. Our average home is probably, near 90 years old on average. Our average row home and houses around 90 years old. And when you have disturbance, there's a whole lot that goes into a potential catastrophe, and that is collapses. We've seen an increase in building collapses, loss of life, loss of property, and that's on the residential side, notwithstanding, the 22nd of Market issue, where Councilman Jones was appointed by Council President to be the chair of the Special Committee on Demolition. So as a result of some unfortunate situations, we create policies and codes, and that's how codes are made. Most times when something from an international code that comes through the state that's vetted out, it's usually through a loss of life or a loss of property and damage. So they're here to protect, and this is, I believe, an incredible step moving forward in the right direction. All right, to ensure that the safety of our citizens and the properties that we have. When you dig, you have walls, bearing walls. You have water pipes. There's a lot that goes into it that is unseen to the untrained eye. So I want to thank Sarah and Betsy for making sure that this is the direction that we're headed. And the chair recognizes Councilmember Dom.
Chair, and thank you, Sarah Damo, for your testimony. I have a question. If I live next door to a property that's going through this excavation, does this cover getting a structural report on my property prior to the work and a structural report on my property after the work's completed?
I'm sorry, there was an echo. So part of the application process would be that a professional engineer needs to provide a pre-construction survey, and part of that, if it is a row home, would be the condition of that shared party wall. Then there are continuous special inspections during the process. So a professional qualified inspector is on site the entire time while it's being done. There aren't specific requirements for a report afterwards, but there is an inspection continuously while the work is being done.
So I'm in support of this, but I'm just going to recommend that you might want to look at. I've had some experience in this area where people are building, and I require them to give me. I hire my own engineer, structural, and I do a structural report on the adjacent property that I might own, and they pay for it. But I do the hiring, so there's no conflict. And then after they're finished, I have the opportunity to hire that same structural engineer again, just to verify that whatever they did in their property did not structurally affect my property. That it's at their cost. They don't control the engineer, because then it would be a conflict. The adjacent party, adjacent owner should control the engineer, but the person responsible for the construction should pay for the cost. It's just something we should look at. Just want to mention it, because I think that's really, at the end of the day, that really will protect people in this situation. Because you could have a situation which may not occur, or you may not know about it for a year or two. That's because the construction work that was done adjacent caused this problem. And if you have a structural engineer that's hired third party, then there's also insurance on that structural engineer that after that report, so that property owner has someone to go back to. I'm just mentioning it for something to look at down the road. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Dom, and I think that's a great question. Maybe a question for the department can be, as we move forward, is that upon a CO, could there be a walkthrough in just these situations? So I think one of the important things of this bill is notification, which neighbors have never received before. Upon somebody who's just building by right, now has safety requirements through engineers and licensing for and permitting for excavation. So maybe a post conversation could be through regs. Upon a CO having in these situations, right, where this is triggered, this legislation would be triggered, having a walkthrough, quick inspection, even if it's not a certified engineer, but having somebody in the department that's qualified to walk through upon, the final CO. Just another conversation that we can take back in addition to, Councilmember Dom's great question.
Mr. Chair, I think it's important, though, that it be a third party independent of the city, so the city has no liability that way, so that the individual property owner hires that third party structural engineer, paid for by the person doing the work, the property owner who's excavating, but let the individual next door have that ability to do a survey before and a survey after, and making sure that there's no structural damage to their property. They're an innocent bystander in this whole thing. This is happening now, by the way. This does happen in a lot of developments we see around the city, where people that want to develop, we go to them and say, you're going to have to pay for a third-party independent contractor, or structural engineer, rather, to do the report before, and then once you're finished, you'll pay for the report afterwards. Any damage, they're liable for.
It's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Absolutely. Anyone else on the committee have any questions regarding bill number 210389? Is there anyone else here who has joined us today that wishes to speak or have any comments on bill number 210389? Being none, Mr. Damo, thank you for your testimony on that particular bill. We will now move on to bill number 210418. Mr. Brazel, we have Sarah Damo again giving testimony. Mr. Damo, would you please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony of bill number 210481.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson Heenan and members of the Licenses and Inspections Committee. My name is Sarah Damo, and I am the Legislative Affairs Manager of the Department of Licenses and Inspections. I am here to provide testimony on bill number 210481, which, if enacted, will amend Chapter 9-600 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Service and Other Businesses, to modify the requirements to operate self-service laundry, all under certain terms and conditions. If enacted, this bill would remove the maximum square footage limitation of 2,500 square feet for self-service laundries. This provision is outdated and creates potential conflicts with the Philadelphia Zoning Code. The Department of Licenses and Inspections is supportive of this bill and is prepared to enforce its provisions should it become law. Thank you for the opportunity to provide the department's testimony. I'm happy to answer questions at this time.
Thank you for your testimony. I just have a question. This bill is requiring for contact information. Is that correct? What of the owner, and it shall be made public in a publicly viewed location?
I'm sorry, are you asking about the self-service laundry bill, the
Yes.
481?
Yes.
No, there's no requirement for owner information. The only thing that this bill does is remove a maximum square footage limitation that the code currently lists.
Oh, okay. So I apologize. I thought we were adding in contact information and having it publicly viewed for the public's in case the public needs it. So we're taking out the 25,000 square foot or 2,500 square foot. Is there a minimum or maximum, or just taking it out, removing it?
So I just pulled up the code. I didn't have it in front of me. Too many different bills and things in front of me at once. But the telephone number of the owner and operator, that is something that is already in the code. So that's not being touched. We're not proposing to make any changes to that. So currently right now, the code has a section that says that any self-service laundry cannot be more than 2,500 square feet. What we're proposing is to take that section out. So there would be no minimum, no maximum. It can be any square footage. And the reasoning for that is that this conflicts with the zoning code. The zoning code, if we wanted to limit the square footage, it should actually live within the zoning code, not because essentially you could get all of your permits, all of your licenses, you could start operating, and only then are you in violation of Title IX. So we wanted to clean up that conflict by removing that limitation.
Very smart. I love it when we clean up some of our codes. So thank you. Is there anyone else on the committee have any questions or concerns or wish to speak on bill number 210481? Anyone here from the general public that has joined us in today's hearing wishes to speak or have any comments or questions or concerns on bill number 21481? That being none, Ms. Adamo, I thank you for your time. and appreciate you answering all the questions as you always do, as the best of your ability, and are prepared. This will conclude our hearing, and we will now go into our public meeting. Being that there are no further questions from members of the committee, no other witnesses to testify here today, I will ask if anyone else is present in this hearing whose name we have not called, again, who wishes to offer any kind of testimony or questions or concerns that are being here considered. Being none, I want to thank all the panelists, all the witnesses for participating today. We value your opinions. I now invite all panelists and all witnesses to please disconnect from this meeting before we go into our public meeting. We will now pause briefly from this proceeding for multiple witnesses to leave. Mr. Brazel, are you going to notify? You can let me know when that happens.
Yes, Chair. It appears as though we're good to go, Councilman.
Okay, so this concludes the public hearing of the committee. We will now go into our public meeting to consider the action being taken on the bills before this committee here today. Mr. Brazel, would you please take roll?
Councilmember Alan Dom.
Present.
Councilmember Mark Squilla.
Present.
Councilmember Kenyatta Johnson. Councilmember David O.
Present.
Councilmember Curtis Jones Jr.
Present.
Councilmember Catherine Gilmore Richardson. And Committee Chair Bobby Heenan.
I am present. We have a quorum. I want to thank you. Now we will go into our public meeting. The chair recognizes Councilmember Dom for a motion on the amendment to Bill number 210117.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I offer an amendment to Bill number 210117. A copy of the amendment has been circulated to all members of the committee. I move that the amendment to Bill number 210117 be approved.
Second.
It has been second for the record by Councilman Squilla, and moved and properly second that the amendment to Bill number 210117 be approved. All those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Nay. The ayes have it. Motion carries. The amendment to Bill number 210117 has been approved. The chair recognizes Councilmember Dobb on a motion to Bill number 210117 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that Bill number 210117 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation. Further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading this bill at the next session of council.
Need a second? It has been moved and properly second by Councilmember Jones that Bill number 210117 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit the first reading of this bill at our next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Bill number 210117 will be reported out of this committee with a favorable recommendation and with the rule suspension as to be heard at our next session of council. Chair recognizes Council Member Dom for a motion on Bill number 210205.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that Bill number 210205 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation. Further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
It has been moved and properly second by Councilmember Jones that Bill number 210205 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit the first reading of this bill at our next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Nay. The ayes have it. Motion carries. The chair recognizes Councilmember Dom for a motion on the amendment to Bill number 210388.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I offer an amendment to Bill number 210388. A copy of the amendment has been circulated to all members of the committee. I move that the amendment to Bill number 210388 be approved.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Jones that Bill number 210, that the amendment to Bill number 210388 be approved. All those in favor will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries for the amendment to Bill number 210388, and it has been approved. Chair now recognizes Councilmember Dom for a motion on Bill number 210388 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that Bill number 210388 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Jones that Bill number 210388 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit the first reading of this bill at our next session of council. All those in favor will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The motion carries. Chair recognizes Councilmember Dom for a motion on the amendment to Bill number 210389.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I offer an amendment to Bill number 210389. A copy of the amendment has been circulated to all members of the committee, and I move the amendment to Bill number 210389 be approved.
Need a second?
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Jones that the amendment to Bill number 210389 be approved. All those in favor will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries to the amendment to Bill number 210389, and it has been approved. The chair recognizes Councilmember Dom for a motion for Bill number 210389 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that Bill number 210389 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and to further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Jones that Bill number 210389 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit the first reading of this bill at our next session of council. All those in favor will motion by signifying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries. The chair recognizes Councilmember Dom for a motion to Bill number 210481.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that Bill number 210481 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to first read this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Jones that Bill number 210481 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit the first reading of this bill at our next session of council. All those in favor will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries. This does conclude our public meeting on license and inspection. I'd like to thank you all for your time, your expertise, and the conversation. We will now convene and conclude the business before the Committee of Public Property and Public Works here today. Thank you very much for your attendance. Be safe, be careful, and continue to serve the public with high integrity as you do. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.